Hello and welcome to Theater Operations Unleashed, the monthly show that explores the ins and outs of theater operations, management, facilities, and design. I'm your host, Raymond Kent. In each episode, we will be focusing on management, operations, design, trends, and best practices in the performing arts. I hope to bring you both insights from my 4 decades in the industry, as well as engaging conversations with theater professionals about the challenges and rewards of their work. We'll also cover a wide range of topics from budgeting and scheduling to marketing and audience development, theater technology, and many other related topics. Whether you're a theater maker yourself or just interested in the industry, I hope you'll find this podcast informative and inspiring. So sit back, relax, or lean in, and let's dive into the world of theater. Hello and welcome to Theater Operations Unleashed. I'm your host, Raymond Kent, and I'm here with my good friend, Alycyn Keeling. Alycyn is the executive director of the Wallace Theater in Levelland, Texas, in the heart of rural West Texas. And she has guided the Wallace from a theater that was closed for almost 30 years to an organization that serves the community with 60 plus events per year through educational, arts, and cultural programming, and is producing its own live theater. She is currently overseeing a $5+ million capital renovation project and building an education department within the theater that will serve the almost 4,500 students in Hockley County each year. She currently serves as on the board of the League of Historic American Theaters, the Lubbock chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and the advisory boards for the Office of Outreach and Engagement and the Vernacular Music Center at Texas Tech University. Before moving home to Levelland, she worked for the U.S. Department of Education, serving in the George W. Bush administration, at the Margaret Spellings and Company, and at the George W. Bush Institute as part of the team that launched the Presidential Leadership Scholarship Program, and she holds a Bachelor of Business Management degree from Texas A&M University. And I believe I'm going to get this maybe right, hopefully, but she's back in her hometown of Levelland and loving it. I believe I said that correctly. Did I not?
That's right. I am living in Levelland and loving it. That's my hashtag.
Welcome, Alycyn. I'm so excited to be talking to you on many fronts. You have such an interesting history and background professionally that has sort of culminated where you are today. And we'll get into that a little bit here. But then you're also heavily involved in League of Historic American Theaters. In addition to developing these educational programs, that is quite a Herculean task that you've set out for yourself here. So I'm really kind of excited to have you here as part of this show, where we talk about all things theater operations and theater management and design and facilities and theater in general, and how people wind up where they are and some of the things they wish they knew and things like that. So because of your unique background, particularly in politics and education, can you talk a little bit about how you feel that's either helped or hindered your role in both the Wallace and at LHAT?
Sure. For me, I see it has helped me in every way possible. I got to work with and for incredible people in the administration at the highest levels of government. And I got to see things and learn things from a national perspective. When I was working in Washington, D.C., I will say I learned early on. I struggled a little bit because I loved being there. I loved what I was doing. I loved being kind of in the action of so many things. But I always struggled that the work for me was so far from the people that it was directly impacting. I always kind of had this feeling that I fit in both places. I wanted to be in both. The experiences that I had and the people that I got to work with, they prepared me in every way to do what I'm doing now. Most specifically, the last position I had before moving back home at the George W. Bush Institute, developing the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. I got to work on the team that put this incredible program together for anyone that's not familiar with that, I highly encourage you to look it up. It is a collaboration between four presidential centers: George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, the Clinton Foundation, and the LBJ Foundation.
Hmm.
There were four presidents, that were very uniquely kind of from the area, the South Central area of the country. And these four organizations came together to develop a leadership program that would bring people from all facets across the country, from all industries, education, politics, government, local government, business. And each person comes to this organization or this program with a specific project in mind, that they want, an issue that they want to solve, and then they get to travel to each of these four presidential centers and learn leadership lessons from those presidents. The curriculum was developed by instructors from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and it's an incredible opportunity to build a network of principled leaders who have this knowledge base now to hopefully go out and serve some of the country's greatest issues. That's what the hope is, that it continues to grow through that. And that program, we actually started developing the plans. This was a program that was really thought about and developed in the mind of Secretary Margaret Spellings. She had the idea for this, and so she brought together a team of people that started working on the idea development, and we did everything within a year. We put together the basic kind of the white papers and the plans for it, worked to bring on the partners from the curriculum developers, the other presidential centers. We developed the application process, developed the class modules, the marketing, did the fundraising. This program raised over $5 million within a year to get it launched. And so working on all of those facets and getting to work under the people and learning from each of them helped me develop skill sets and a broad understanding for how do you start a new project, how do you start a new program. And I feel like I've translated that into every bit of what we've done at the Wallace, because the theater had been closed for over 30 years. And at that point, we didn't have a community that was probably clamoring for the theater to come back. Um, we are in a small town, it's 30 miles west of Lubbock. And so people over the years, the entertainment needs have changed. It's easy for them to travel back and forth between Lubbock to go to the movies, to go see theater, to find other types of entertainment. And I think what I had seen in my work in the national setting in Washington, D.C., as I started to learn about what opportunities were available to people across the country. And I started to think, well, there's no reason that kids in my hometown shouldn't have those same opportunities. And there was this light bulb moment that I realized we could do that with the theater. And a little bit of background on the theater: my dad purchased the theater when I was in high school. And I will admit, I thought he was a little bit crazy. I wanted nothing to do with it. But today I've realized that he gave me the greatest gift I will probably ever receive in my life, because he gave me an he gave me an opportunity to find my passion and what I feel like is my mission in life, to bring these opportunities back to our community and build something that is going to make our community better for many generations to come.
That's amazing. I'm listening to you describe these programs um, that you've had the good fortune of being involved with and development of leadership, um, simply by being in the environment of other great leaders, right? Um, so often, as you and I have touched on, and I've talked with a number of people about, that isn't always the case when people decide to take on these kinds of projects. So, um, having this opportunity and looking at community needs and how you can apply those lessons learned to the community, I think is pretty intriguing and exciting there. Do you envision in that, um, in the perfect world of the Wallace opening up and everything, that the connection to the community is going to be, I think, the driver of the mission and the vision of the Wallace? Or is it more the intention to bring the outside community to your community?
That's a great question. There's the answer is it's probably a little bit about both, but most importantly, I think for any project, like this, the community that you live in is most important.
Mhm.
The whole reason we are here, the reason we do what we do is for this community and to provide them with opportunities. Our mission statement is creating experiences that entertain, inspire, and empower. And so everything that we do is providing people with an opportunity to engage in something that we hope is going to improve their life in some way. From the entertainment, people look for entertainment because they want a respite from the daily struggles. So we're providing that with something that increases the quality of life. Theater and art, and it's all about telling stories. Our brains are wired for stories, so we can tell stories that inspire people. And the real win is when we then are able to give them the tools that empower them to somehow make a difference in their own lives, to improve their own lives. I think that you look for what does the community want right now? Where are they right now? What is most important to them? And when I look at our community, it's a community that cares about people. They care about each other. That's one of the reasons I really love being back here, is that it's a community that's very supportive, and they care about their families, and they care about their history and generations. And so we want to provide programming that supports that and gives them a gathering place, a place to come together and support one another. But then we also want to provide opportunities for them to experience things that they might not have had the opportunity to do otherwise. Part of my very personal experience, when I was in Washington, D.C., I got to see a theater production of something in the round. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Mm.
And I thought it was so cool. And that was my thought. Why hadn't I seen this before? And so, if we can provide those opportunities for our next generation, we're empowering them to again make a difference in their lives, and just giving them an expanded an opportunity to expand their own minds, expand their knowledge and their own experiences.
Well, I think that educational side of things is uh, a really great driver there, right? I think you are really nailing a point home here in that it really does lend itself the opportunity for people to experience things through a different lens, right?
Mm.
There's so much heavy focus, as I know you're aware, on STEM, right? And we're always trying to put the A into it and
Yes.
create STEAM, right? Um, and because so much of what, even in science and technology and engineering and math and all the other STEM areas, there's so much artistry in it as well, than creativity, that um, oftentimes gets overlooked by communities, right? And there's so heavy a focus. I mean, I come from a small town outside of Cleveland. We still had the connection to the big city of Cleveland, right? But still a small town, um, where there wasn't as much of a focus on arts outside of, say, the marching band or choir. And it was just kind of a thing you did. And it wasn't really something that ever was viewed as a career path or anything like that, right? Um, where when I tend to, because I've been an educator for 22 years, right, at the college level, when I talk to even high school kids, or I have a lot of kids that are in high school that take my class through College Credit Plus, um, talking to them about career opportunities in the arts is something that they don't always think about, right? Because they've been kind of programmed into this idea of, oh no, you need to go into an engineering field, you need to go into a science field, you need to go into this other field that is going to provide you a certain level of quality of life and things like that. And they don't even consider it. The number of engineering students that I've talked to over the years that said, Disney hires engineers, a lot of them. They hire computer programs. They hire all these sort of technical minds. And it's a great, fun place to work. But I think that exposure early in the arts and through arts education, which is something I know you're really developing here at the Wallace, is something that is critical, I think, to any arts organization in their mission, to help foster those ideas. How do you see the work that you're doing in the renovation as helping support that? Right? It's easy to say, oh, I got a theater, here's a box, there's a stage, we're going to put on some shows. But if you're going to create this educational environment, there are other things that you need to consider. So what are you doing within the Wallace to try to support those programs?
So one of the motivating factors for us, the Texas Cultural Trust produced a report a couple of years ago, and it found that students in rural communities have 70% less access to arts education than students in suburban communities. And upon reading that, we decided the Wallace would change that for students in Hockley County. And that's why, through our education department, our mission is that we're going to serve all for this 4,500 students with educational opportunities in the arts each year. A part of the way that we are building that is we are looking to build partnerships with other arts organizations, nonprofits, business leaders, to help support things. And we'll be able to take some programs to the schools. But anybody that has been to a theater production, one that they remember so often, and especially when it comes to historic theaters, that venue, that space plays a huge role in that experience, in cementing those memories that are what help change or make the difference in people's lives. And so, as we are building this theater and building the renovations, thinking through all of that, it is so important that when we bring a group of students in to see a production, whether it's a live theater production, a film, maybe an event with a speaker, or we're even planning to host a children's art gallery event, we want those students to step into that building. We want everybody to step in that building and say, wow. And then we're going to tell the people in this community that this building is here for them. We want them to take ownership of it. And when you create this beautiful space that's unlike a space that they've ever been in before, or when you tell them that that space is theirs and they take ownership of it, it increases their pride, it increases their confidence. And each detail, when it comes to the architectural renovations, that's why we think that every single detail is so important, because each piece of that is going to have an impact on those educational opportunities that
Mhm.
we are going to provide for all of our students.
So talk to me about the design process. I mean, I know, um, my perspective of it because we have involvement in it, but talk to me about the design process, because so often, um, mission and vision and those operational and managerial things don't get considered. But it sounds like you're really diving deep into that, and really thinking through the physical space of how that's going to be supportive. How are you communicating that to the design team? What challenges maybe have you found in articulating that, in terms of what's driving that, rather than just somebody handing you a building and now you've got to try to fit into it.
Well, what I find amazing is that we have a somewhat large two-story building. We've got a big auditorium. Big for us, it will be about 250 seats. So I know on the grand scale of theaters, that's a small theater, but in our community, it's a large size building, and we were also able to purchase the building adjacent to the theater. So we will be able to build our dressing rooms and our green room and expand our lobby, which is so big for such a big asset for historic theaters. But as we've worked with the team, first of all, we love getting to work with DLR. We've loved every bit about the process and the way that you all work. But the team came down and we sat down and went through. We talked about the programming and what we needed the space to do. And it very quickly became apparent that we actually didn't have enough space to do all the things that we wanted to do.
Mhm.
So we then have to start thinking about how can we most efficiently use our spaces, and what is the most important function of the space. Um, and we've also started to think about, okay, what's most important right now, what becomes a longer term program that we may need to do some things in another venue. So in terms of our education, we don't have a building that has a lot of classrooms, so that's why part of our educational department is going to develop programs that we can actually take to the schools.
Mhm.
I think that helps in ways because that's going to allow us to I think reach even more, and it makes it easier on the schools. But throughout the design process, one of the things that I have worked to really communicate to the team, for us, this project is very personal. It's personal because I have a family history.
Mhm.
It's personal to each of our board members. Our original five board members will have served for 10 years
Wow.
when we finish this project, because they committed to serving on the board to see the renovation process through. Um, it's personal because every morning I wake up and I think about um, the students in our community that need the programs, the experiences that the Wallace has to offer. And we can't do that to our fullest extent yet because we don't have a finished building.
Mhm. Sure. Sure.
So, you know, sharing that with the design team, so they understand why we care so deeply about the details and the environment that the space creates. We've also talked, when it comes to the technical theater side, we are we are producing our own live theater, and I am so proud of our team that we have that produces that. I think we have some of the absolute best talent in the country working right here in Levelland, Texas to produce this theater. And I'm so proud of them because they also, as we produce, they're taking the time to teach the next generation. We've got high school students that are serving as production assistants, and they're helping do the light cues and sound cues and projection and things for our shows. And so, as we build the theater, we want it to be a space that is going to be accessible for us to continue to create learning opportunities. From a business perspective, we are a nonprofit organization, but being a nonprofit organization does not mean that you you don't make money, but you don't need to be going in the red. You need to
Sure.
look to break even. And arts organizations, I think, are challenging because there's people that again, maybe they haven't had the experience with the arts. You have to work to communicate why the arts are important, the larger impact that this can have on the community. Americans for the Arts has a great arts economic
Yep.
calculator. And so, we've used that. Um, but you have to take all of these things in mind and think about how are you going to bring in the additional revenue. Thinking again about our community, we have a lot of people that, one of their barriers to the arts may be that they cannot always afford a ticket price. Well, if our one of our goals is to make it accessible, we have to remove that financial barrier. So we've created a pay what you will night for our productions, but we have to think about, okay, if we're reducing our ticket price, where are we going to generate that income needed to continue to produce the shows? So we've looked at other opportunities, like with our expanded lobby and having concession area, putting in a catering kitchen. Are we going to be able to open that up and maybe do some kind of sandwich lunch opportunity, or host happy hours and things for people to come to in the afternoon? How can we find other ways to generate revenue to support that? And the architecture and design team, that's something they are doing such a good job of helping us think through. Can you set up the space to do all of these things? And when you're very limited on your space, it's not easy.
Right. And in an overall sense, having that quality of design team, and this is certainly not just the company that I work for, but in general, making sure that you've got the right team that understands those challenges
Hmm.
is so vitally important. And being able to translate that into being supportive of your mission and your vision in a thoughtful way that gives your organization the best opportunity for success. You brought up an interesting thing a few moments ago, um, about revenue and things like that. Contributory revenue is, of course, a huge challenge in the arts, as we all know.
Hmm.
Not everything comes from the box office, despite what some people naively like to believe, right? So whether it's investments or grants or donations or what have you, or other opportunities, like you talk about, creating maybe lunchtime opportunities, or maybe there's some corporate events or other things that activate that space in its downtime, right? You've got these big empty buildings that uh, for a long time were active only at night when a production was going on, but sat empty throughout the rest of the day. And how do you think differently about those spaces, and what are the partnerships that may be outside of the arts that could take advantage of a space like that, um, in a prescribed manner that could offer some financial contributions to help the organization along, right? But the other thing that you brought up was your board, and how you've got this great support from your board and longevity with the board and everything. Board participation is so critical, I think, to success in terms of both the partnership with the leadership, right? Like yourself,
Hmm.
but also a partnership with the community, because so often the boards are not people that come from the arts. They are oftentimes people that come from the business community or the philanthropy community that have a limited understanding of really the ins and outs of an arts organization, right? Um, and they have a passion, otherwise they wouldn't be there, right? They really have a passion, which is fantastic. But how do you see, uh, or how do you leverage that passion into having successful relationships with your board for mutual success across the entire organization, so that they and the leadership and everybody that works within the organization are all rowing the same direction?
Well, I think when it comes to a board, again, we are very fortunate. When I've thought about, the components, we have amazing people on our board. I am so thankful for each and every person. They come with a variety of skill sets. You need business leaders. You need that perspective on your board. You need the perspective of people who understand the arts. You need people that can help advise with marketing. You need people that represent different facets of the community, people who have the history with the community, people who are raising young families in the community. Um, and I think something that seems to be unique and very special about our board, that makes us work so well together, is that we don't have anyone that is coming with their own personal agenda.
Mhm.
Everyone understands our mission. They fully understand our vision. They understand the broader picture of what we are working for. Everybody is going to have their own personal reason why this project is important to them, and you need all of those perspectives, but you need them to come together to support the overall mission and work together in that way. Last year we had the opportunity to apply for a large grant, and the foundation came and did a site visit. all of my board members, except for two who couldn't take off work at the time, were able to attend that site visit. And we had 10 people sitting around a table, and they each went through and shared with that foundation why this project was meaningful to them. We ended up receiving a grant of $1 million
Wow.
after that site visit. And I give all of the credit to our board and our staff that were able to come together and share why that was so meaningful. I think as for anyone that's got a board and thinking about that, understanding that, everyone also has different things that they value. We're actually working through a values exercise with our board and our organization right now, because we're also, as we're building and getting ready to reopen our venue at the end of next year, we're also thinking about the long term. The original board members are going to complete their terms. We're going to have new people that come on, and we want to make sure that our organization is set very solid in what our mission is and what our values are, so that as new opportunities come along, as we grow in our programming and we grow in all the things that we do, we can go back to those things. And each of the people are very well grounded, and we have a guiding force of what we are working towards. Like you said, the passion. You need to have people on the board that are passionate about what you're doing and that are passionate about making the community better. I think that's something that theaters are very uniquely situated to do. They bring such quality of life opportunities to a community. They hold special memories for everyone that has walked through those doors. And I think it's a great responsibility to remember that you hold those memories. You hold the responsibility of, if you're a nonprofit, and well, if you're a nonprofit or for profit and taking patrons ticket money, you have a great responsibility to those patrons and those donors and the experiences that you are creating and how you're giving back to your community.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, that's I think you're right on target. I think there are certainly organizations out there that are challenged with board members that can't set aside ego or their own agendas, right? Um, and it very well could just be reflexive. They might be the CEO of a successful corporation in town that, and they're used to being the boss, quote unquote, and they have a hard time putting that aside, and want to start directing things they would a for-profit company or their own company, which doesn't always align with a nonprofit arts organization and a mission, directed that way. So there are certainly things to navigate, and making sure that conversations with board members about what that mission and vision is, separation between leadership and the board, but alignment, I think, is absolutely critical, right? Um, I've known a couple arts organizations that I've talked with, uh, where that hasn't been the case, where there's been a board member that's, lack of a better term, gone rogue and tried to usurp some of the executive directors, objectives. And because they felt like they were contributing, but I think for them it was more of a barrier of communication, lack of communication and effective communication about where that demarc is. Um, so that particular board member didn't really fully understand what the role of that executive director was, and give agency to that executive director to execute, because that is their job, is to execute, and the opportunity to be successful with their support. Instead, they tried to go around and circumvent and ride roughshod over, which I know can be a challenge. In your role with LHAT, and your opportunity to speak to so many organizations across that spectrum of in similar situations. There are a lot of communities out there that have these great historic venues that say, hey, we've got this thing, we should do something with it, right? Let's fix it up and come on, let's put on a show. It's their proverbial barn. Um, and again, good-minded, good-hearted, passionate people that don't necessarily understand how the arts works or how it needs to evolve, because we are in a transition period, I feel, after COVID and everything else. What are you hearing from folks in League of Historic American Theaters in terms of their struggles, and what kind of guidance is the organization, if any, giving to them?
I want to hit on something real quick that you touched on just a second ago, kind of back about the board, but I think it expands to all facets of the organization. Communication is so important. You, there's the saying, you can never communicate enough. And
Right.
that is absolutely true. For an organization to be successful across the board, it comes down to relationships. When you think about funding, when you think about your board, when you think about your patrons, your constituents, you're building a relationship with all of these people, and you need to make sure that there are good lines of communication, and that you're communicating clearly about what you're doing, and what is going on. And with a focus on that, I think that people and organizations that maybe there's some challenges within leadership. The way to start solving those challenges is to open up more communication and get to understand where people are coming from, because somewhere there's got to be some miscommunication, right? And
Right.
so if you can understand both sides, it'll help be successful in the long run. um you asked about um talking about the industry is changing, and how is LHAT supporting, and what are some of the challenges. The thing that I'm looking at right now, and as we're getting ready again to reopen our building, and planning for our first full season in our building, which I'm so excited. I can't wait, but also knowing that I need to have a little bit more time to make sure we're planned and ready. Um, the way people are uh, purchasing tickets and interacting is changing. You've talked about it on previous podcasts that subscription purchases are down.
Yep.
We've seen it. So even while our building is under renovations, we are working out of other venues to produce our shows. And this past summer, we had a show. We opened it up in Lubbock and then toured it over to Levelland, to South Plains College, which we were really excited to get to do. Um, as of Monday, we were opening 3 shows on starting Thursday that week at South Plains College. We maybe had 20 tickets sold for each of those shows. I was very nervous.
Yeah.
By the end of the week, we had actually exceeded the number of ticket sales for each of the shows that
Wow.
we had in our Lubbock venue. And it's because people are just waiting to buy last minute. I think we're seeing that across the industry. I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know that anybody knows what that answer is yet. But I think it's something that marketers and venue operators are just going to have to work through. That you're not going to have you're not going to see a revenue income or that you can count on earlier. It may come in at the last minute, which does make budgets challenging. I think the League of Historic American Theaters does an incredible job of creating a network where people are very comfortable sharing their experiences, sharing what they've learned. That's one of the greatest things that has been so helpful to me throughout this project, is that I have a network. I can get on the LHAT chat network and ask a
Mhm.
question, or I can read and follow along and learn from the things that other people are doing. It's very supportive of that. That's, I think, just one of the biggest challenges that I see right now. I think also in terms of from my perspective, being a small theater in a rural community, in a community that has not had as much access to the arts. Um, there are other theaters like this, and these kinds of projects are expensive, and they take a lot of work. And so there's a lot of projects, unfortunately, that I've seen that don't make it. We've been very fortunate to see success, to be able to gain the support of our community and foundations. And I think that it goes back to relationships, and also thinking about, where is your community? What do they need? How can you serve them? And that's where we've really focused on education, because we know that we can support our whole community by providing these educational opportunities. We can support our students, we can support our teachers, we can support our school districts, and we can provide opportunities where people can learn new skills, that can translate in a lot of different ways. And so I think that advising others to think about some of those things. How are you serving your community? And um, also, what is your big vision, and what can you do on a small scale to start to get there? So we'd been capital fundraising kind of from the beginning, starting in 2015, but we didn't really get our first major capital gift until 2020. So in the past 3 years, we've raised over $3 million, but we took those first 5 years or so to do programming on a small scale that we could do. So we had a space where we hosted. We received a grant for to put in a small film screening room, and so we would do movies. We did small concerts. We started putting together. We did a theater camp, other education programs, so that people could see our value and how we could serve the community outside of just being a movie theater again. So find ways to start small and build that trust within your community, and communicate about what your larger value is. And then I think people will always have those memories, those ties to that historic building. It's very special, and that is something unique that not everyone has.
Sure.
That's definitely an asset. But think about how, what can you do to engage and serve the community first, so that they will then want to support you and invest in you.
One thing I would probably add to that, I
Mhm.
think that's all fantastic. One thing I would probably add to that is also think about resiliency, right? We saw this in the pandemic. So many organizations flying by the seat of their pants, couldn't never really thought about resiliency and what does that mean, right? Financial resiliency, programmatic resiliency, things like that. And to look at these historic buildings, these historic theaters, or theater in general, you're right. People have an emotional attachment, sometimes a very deep emotional attachment of, oh, I remember going on my first date with my husband here 75 years ago, whatever, right? Which is great. And we have to, I think, in many ways, honor that tradition and that memory, but always be able to pivot to the future for the sustainability. And I'm not just talking environmental sustainability, I'm talking sustainability of the organization and the
Yes.
resiliency. The pandemic really put a lot of theaters back on their heels, and a lot of them did not make it, unfortunately. Um, we saw some try to double down on what they'd always been doing, which wasn't working. And we saw others that just kind of put their hands up and didn't know where to go. So I think to have a resiliency plan of action on top of that to sustain the organization into the future, that aligns with the history and the memories and everything else, I think really is something that most organizations really need to be cognizant of.
Well, and that's something that we focus on as an organization very much. We talk a lot about long-term sustainability, as we are writing grants, as we are working with and talking to our donors. It's very important for them to know that their money is not just an investment in today, that they're investing in something that is going to be here for the next 100 years. And one thing that I have learned in talking with other leaders across theaters at LHAT, I think that there are two things that can make a theater successful and long-term sustainability that are integral to that. And one is developing a monthly giving campaign, a monthly membership campaign. So that becomes an amount of income that you know that you're going to get every month.
Right.
That helps, give you some stable income, throughout the year. But then also working to build an endowment. Because when it comes to you know, thinking back about 2020 and the pandemic, I think the League of Historic American Theaters, have been so inspired by them as an organization because their previous boards had built up a reserve fund so that they were able to sustain across that year, and not worry about, are we going to be able to make it. There was kind of an emergency fund there.
Right.
And an endowment can be that fund. It can also be a fund that can again give you a bit of sustainable income every year that you can kind of count on. So those are two things that we are actually, while we are building our programming, while we are raising our capital funds, we have started our endowment fund. We are building our monthly membership program and donors so that we know that there is going to be sustainable income for us going forward.
Yeah, and I know, endowment funds are tricky because depending how they're structured, and I think really having the right counsel towards that, right? Some endowments are out there only for capital expenditure, right, and not operating expenditures. So making sure that you've almost got a relief valve should there
Hmm.
be another, hopefully never, pandemic, that those funds can be tapped. Because there were organizations I'm aware of that had pretty sizable endowments. They just legally couldn't touch it.
Hmm.
And that was problematic for them. I do want to go ahead.
I was just going to say on endowments, I would encourage folks to, we have a community foundation in our area, and then we also have the Hockley County Endowment, that manages endowment funds for various nonprofits within our community. Those are great organizations to partner with, and that's a great way to look to set up your endowment. And like you said, when you go into that, understand what your availability to access those funds are. What you really want to do is, the idea is that you want to try and let those funds grow and grow and grow so that you are gaining more interest off of that each year to build that operational support.
So, what advice would you give the listeners to be successful in taking on projects like the Wallace or historic theaters in general that you've learned either on the job through your past experience in politics, or even as you mentioned to LHAT, where the LHAT chat. I love reading those. I learn a lot about the goings on as well.
Yes, I think the advice that I can give, first and foremost, is um, listen and build relationships, get involved with an organization like the League of Historic American Theaters. I know we are successful today because of the relationships that we have formed there, because of the education sessions that we have been to at each of the conferences, all that we have learned. You talked about having Tony Sias on the show. Tony has been a great mentor to me, as have many of the other board members at the league. A project like this, you need to know, is going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
I think sometimes, you're going to need to make sure you just put your head down and put one foot one step in front of the other and keep doing the work. But don't forget to look up and see the bigger picture and remember what the long term vision is. Be smart about how you're building your business operations, always remember that, especially if you're a nonprofit, that you have a responsibility to take care of the money that others have so generously given to you. And most importantly, that you have the incredible opportunity to serve your community, to make a difference in people's lives in a way that a lot of other organizations don't get the opportunity. And so, continue to find inspiration for that, through that, and have fun. I think that it's a challenge unlike any other. It's not easy, but I think it's probably one of the most rewarding careers anyone could have.
That's fantastic. Last question before we wrap up here. Top five things about Loveland, Texas that you love since you're back.
Gosh, number one, I love the people. I love my hometown community. I love the sunsets in West Texas. We have incredible wine, believe it or not.
Really?
Um, we have one of the largest grape growing regions in the state of Texas, and actually, some of our grapes even get shipped out to California.
Really?
So, yes, West Texas is a great place to grow wine grapes. Um, Really, it comes back down to people. I love our community. I love our town. I love that people want to see it grow and are always willing to lend a hand, roll up their sleeves, and make something happen. The community in Levelland, Texas, has been so supportive of us, and I am so thankful that I get to work with them and live here in Levelland.
So when folks come down to the Wallace to come visit you, what's the best place for them to eat? I'm a
Oh,
foodie. So.
well, I have to say it's actually my house. My mom is a phenomenal cook. That's where I'd take them first. We actually, when DLR came down, we hosted a dinner out in the backyard for
That's
them.
fantastic.
We are hopeful that once the Wallace gets up and running, that it will encourage some great restaurateur to open a great little restaurant in downtown Levelland. I think that'll be a great partner for us.
That's fantastic. Alycyn, thank you for your time today, and for your words of wisdom and encouragement and all the great stuff that you are doing there at the Wallace and with the League of Historic American Theaters. Join us next time when we have more great conversations with other leaders in the industry to talk about all things about theater operations and management and all that other great stuff. Take care.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks for taking the time today to listening to Theater Operations Unleashed. We hope to see you next month.